Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're digging into something called non-arbitrary tokens, or NATs.
Right, and their connection to digital matter theory, DMT.
Exactly. The basic idea, as I understand it, is creating digital tokens, but not just out of thin air. They're grounded in real unchangeable patterns in blockchain data, specifically Bitcoins.
That's the core concept.
So our focus today is really to explore, do we need these NATs? What are the potential problems? We use the NAT token as our main example.
All's good.
And for you listening, we know you want to get a solid handle on the why behind new crypto stuff quickly without getting totally bogged down. That's what we're aiming for.
Okay, so digital matter theory, DMT. What is it? Well, at its heart, it's this idea that you can create a kind of digital substance.
Digital substance, how do you mean?
Think of it like material based on information, something with properties we can interact with digitally. And it leverages these inherent patterns you find in data. And Bitcoin, well, it's kind of the perfect playground for this. It's decentralized, secure, the ledger's public.
Right.
So using even like one single data point from a Bitcoin block, that counts as applying DMT.
Interesting. And we've seen things like this before on Bitcoin, haven't we? Sort of precursors.
Yeah, definitely. You've got ordinal theory, giving Satoshis that collector's value.
Numismatic value.
And rare sats, where the value is purely about where the sat is in the blockchain history.
And bitmap theory too, right? Viewing blocks as digital real estate.
Exactly. All leveraging Bitcoin's structure. But NATs, they're pushing this into the fungible token space, which is a bit different.
So why does this non-arbitrary part matter so much? Why is that significant?
Well, there are a few key things. First, it gives you this strong sense of authenticity, provenance. It's directly tied to the blockchain data, which we know is transparent and, well, basically unchangeable.
Okay, makes sense. Verifiable origin.
Right. Second, you can create unique digital assets linked to historical data, which is pretty novel. Third, it's efficient. You're using patterns that are already there, already established.
Instead of just inventing rules from scratch.
Precisely. And that leads to the last point. It reduces subjectivity. The rules aren't just made up. They're derived from the underlying data source, in this case, Bitcoin.
Okay, let's make this concrete then. Let's talk about NAT. It launched, November 2023?
Yep, November 23. And it's significant because it's really the first fungible token example of DMT in action.
And the crucial link here, the non-arbitrary part, is its supply, right? It's tied to the bits field in Bitcoin blocks.
Exactly. That bits field relates to Bitcoin's mining difficulty. So every time a new Bitcoin block is mined, boom, a certain amount of NAT gets generated.
So its creation is directly tied to Bitcoin's proof of work.
Correct. Which is interesting because it creates this potential extra incentive for Bitcoin miners, but crucially, it does it without needing any changes to Bitcoin's actual protocol.
Right, so it's like a layer on top, offering a supplementary reward. This could be important, especially as the main Bitcoin block rewards keep getting cut in half with the halvings.
That's the idea. It could help support miner revenue long term.
Now, one thing that jumps out is the supply. Unlike, say, Bitcoin itself with its 21 million cap, NAT doesn't have a predefined maximum supply.
No, it doesn't. The supply is dynamic. It just keeps expanding as long as Bitcoin blocks are being mined.
So its issuance rate is basically governed by how quickly Bitcoin blocks are found.
That's right. Tied directly to Bitcoin's pulse, you could say.
Okay, so new block, new NAT, awarded to the miner who found the block. This brings up a practical question, especially now with mining pools being so dominant. We see pools like Foundry USA holding huge amounts, like the data shows over 1 trillion NAT.
Yeah, they're major players.
So when a pool like Foundry finds a block, they get the NAT. But what happens inside the pool? How does that NAT get distributed to all the individual miners who contributed hash power to find that block?
That's a really important practical point. And the sources we looked at don't explicitly detail the intrapool mechanics for every pool.
Right.
But, based on how pools generally work, it's pretty safe to assume each pool sets its own rules. It likely involves distributing rewards like NAT proportionally, based on how much work, how much hash power each miner contributed to finding that block.
Okay, so it probably follows their standard reward distribution system, whatever that might be.
Most likely, yes.
Yeah.
It would be part of their operational agreement with their miners.
All right, that makes sense. Now, let's pivot to some of the maybe tougher questions. Potential vulnerabilities, things you might be thinking about if you're looking at this. One thing that seems central is this reliance on well, a specific company or entity. It seems like maybe the DMT creators or someone like Track.network. They maintain the systems that actually watch Bitcoin for new blocks and handle the NAT distribution.
Yes, this is a critical aspect to consider. There appears to be infrastructure maintained by specific entities that monitors Bitcoin and essentially manages the NAT ledger based on block data.
And that immediately raises a flag, right? What if that company or its systems, what if they fail or just stop operating?
Exactly. The potential consequence is that the creation and the tracking of new NAT tokens could just stop. It introduces this element of dependency.
Which feels quite different from the trust we place in Bitcoin itself, you know? Bitcoin's ledger is decentralized, immutable. We trust the network.
Precisely. With Bitcoin, trust is distributed. With NAT, at least currently, there seems to be a reliance on these specific systems running correctly and continuously.
So how do we know that their ledger, the one tracking NAT, is safe? Is it protected from manipulation in the same way Bitcoin is? That seems like a core uncertainty.
It's definitely the core question around trust and centralization here. The sources do mention Track.network providing indexer support for token holders. And the FAQs also point to future support from mscribe.io and Track for checking balances and things. So yes, the ecosystem relies on these indexers and platforms being accurate and available.
It implies a level of trust needed in those specific service providers, which is different from trusting the Bitcoin protocol itself.
It is. It's something anyone involved needs to be aware of, this reliance on supporting infrastructure.
Which naturally brings us to a pretty fundamental question. Does NAT actually need to exist? What's the argument for it?
Well, the main argument frames NAT as a kind of mission coin for Bitcoin.
A mission coin.
Yeah, the mission being to help secure Bitcoin long term. The idea is tied to Bitcoin potentially becoming primarily a store of value.
What?
If people are mostly holding Bitcoin, not transacting frequently, then transaction fees alone might not be enough to incentivize miners to keep securing the network way down the line, especially after block rewards diminish significantly.
Right, low transaction volume could mean low fee revenue for miners.
I see. So NAT is proposed as this extra supplementary reward to keep miners incentivized to keep the network secure.
And we've seen some numbers thrown around, right? Potential earnings for pools like Foundry, even at relatively modest NAT market caps, could be quite significant.
Yes, projections show that even at, say, a $100 million market cap for NAT, it could add a noticeable chunk to miner income. And the key distinction they make is that it's not arbitrary.
It's not just some random token.
Exactly. It's rooted in that verifiable Bitcoin data, the bits field, the difficulty target. That's its non-arbitrary anchor.
And this links back to the supply thing, too. It expands with Bitcoin mining.
Right. It has this expansionary model tied directly to Bitcoin's ongoing operation. It's a different kind of tokenomics, intrinsically linked to the health and activity of the Bitcoin network itself.
Okay, so putting aside the deeper questions for a moment, if you're listening and thinking, where can I actually find or trade this NAT? What's the current situation?
Right now, it's mainly on secondary markets. Places like SuperX, Ordinal's Wallet, Taproot Swap are mentioned.
So decentralized exchanges or smaller platforms mostly?
It seems that way currently. But there is apparently a push from the community to get it onto bigger centralized exchanges.
Oh, interesting. A community effort.
Yeah, the TAP Foundation is mentioned as helping manage contributions for potential CEX listings, trying to increase that broader accessibility.
That sounds very organic, different from a lot of crypto projects that launch with big VC backing and huge marketing budgets.
It really does seem like more of a grassroots community-driven thing, which has its pros, maybe fair distribution, strong community.
But also challenges, I imagine. Getting widespread adoption without that big initial push and funding must be harder.
Absolutely. It faces the typical hurdles of organic growth in a very noisy market.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. We've taken a deep dive into NAT, looking at it as a prime example of these non-arbitrary tokens. We've seen its unique tie-in to Bitcoin's data, specifically that bits field. We've talked about its potential role in incentivizing miners long-term.
And keeping Bitcoin secure, potentially.
Right. But we've also hit on those critical questions around its dependency on external systems for, well, its ongoing existence and tracking.
And it all circles back to that core idea of digital matter theory, trying to create digital assets based on Bitcoin's inherent properties, not just arbitrary rules.
It's definitely a different way of thinking about token creation compared to, just launching an ERC-20 with a made-up supply cap.
It absolutely is a different paradigm.
So maybe here's a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. As this digital landscape keeps evolving so fast, how will these kinds of truly non-arbitrary assets, the ones intrinsically linked to bedrock blockchains like Bitcoin, how will they change how we think about digital value and trust?
Yeah, and what's the right balance between this kind of innovation and potentially some reliance on intermediaries, even within this whole decentralized world?
Lots to think about there.
Definitely. And if you want to explore more, check out the Digital Matter Theory Git book. You can also find NAT on CoinMarketCap and dive into the community discussions on Discord and Telegram.
Good pointers. There's clearly a lot more detail out there if you want to go deeper.